I'm Andrew Moran, Liberty Nation's economics editor.
Very, very rocky.
Death by government.
Drain the swamp.
Hello and welcome to another installment of Liberty Nation's Swamponomics videocast. I'm Andrew Moran, Liberty Nation's economics editor. This week, President Joe Biden is gifting President-elect Donald Trump with belated Christmas presents. The December Consumer Price Index report was released. It was quite the spectacle. While investors cheered the 0.1% dip in the core inflation part, which removes the volatile energy and food components, headline inflation pressures were broad-based. The annual inflation rate rose to 2.9%, slightly below the 12-month trailing average of 3%. Everything from shelter to energy to food saw increases. And this represented the third consecutive monthly increase in the annual inflation rate. It is not exactly surprising either. Energy costs have been rising. We'll get to that shortly. The money supply has surged every month in 2024. Spending and borrowing have accelerated over the last few months. We'll get to that shortly too. Now, on the energy front, West Texas Intermediate crude futures, a U.S. benchmark for crude oil prices, had surged 10% over the past month, reaching $78 per barrel on the New York Mercantile Exchange. Brent crude, a global benchmark for oil prices, has climbed 8% and topped $80 a barrel on London's ICE Futures Exchange. While freezing temperatures have played a role in the recent rally, traders have reacted to President Biden's sweeping sanctions on Russia. The president approved the, quote, most significant sanctions yet on Russia's energy sector by slashing the country's revenues that continue to fund the war in Ukraine. Additionally, the latest sanctions package applies to tankers carrying Russian crude and removes a provision exempting the intermediation of energy payments from sanctions on Russian banks. This policy could remove 700,000 barrels per day from global energy markets and threaten the projected surplus in 2025. Remember, President Biden and Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen insisted for years that they would limit their restrictions to ensure oil prices do not spiral out of control and trigger inflationary pressures back home. Also, let's not forget one thing. The sanctions are in addition to the ban on offshore drilling in federal waters that could be challenged for Trump and his team to remove due to a 70-year-old law that Biden exploited. Meanwhile, the U.S. Treasury Department released the December monthly Treasury statement and confirmed that the federal government borrowed more than $700 billion in the first quarter of fiscal year 2025. This is $200 billion more than the same time a year ago, or about 40%. With the Federal Reserve cutting interest rates by 1% since September and signaling more rate cuts ahead, and the Treasury starting off the fiscal year with one of the largest deficits in U.S. history, price inflation will remain above the central bank's 2% target, which Trump will inherit. And that is a spicy meatball. Indeed, President Biden could be getting his last revenge in the home stretch of his presidency. The first, of course, was ensuring that Vice President Kamala Harris lost the November election. The second could be wreaking havoc on the incoming administration's plans. Liberty Nation's editor-in-chief Mark Angelides recently penned a terrific piece examining the suspicious timing of many of these recent policies. He wrote, quote, imagine for a moment the CEO of a Fortune 500 company who makes a series of decisions so damaging to the business that the board votes him out before the end of his contract, and then ask whether the decisions that the old chief executive made should be foisted upon his successor. It doesn't make a huge amount of sense. Biden has stated that his drilling plan protects his legacy. Biden has said the expanded sanctions on Russia will help his successor. Biden has said he could have defeated Trump. Anyone who has observed Washington politics for more than 1 minute can read between the lines. Students can add one more tenet to the Bidenomics doctrine: sabotage by any means necessary. That's it for me this week. Please read my full Swamponomics column on the pages of LibertyNation.com, and be sure to check out my previous Swamponomics TV videos and interviews. Liberty Nation does not endorse candidates or campaigns or legislation, and this presentation is no endorsement. Thank you. I'm Andrew Moran, Liberty Nation's economics editor.
Very, very rocky.
Death by government.
Drain the swamp.